Okay, hello everyone. What a great turnout for this amazing session. We've been so privileged to get Dr. Claire Baker to invite Dr. Claire Baker to talk to us about her really innovative work in the UK, building an understanding about what care leavers see as important for their health and well-being and what makes life good for them. Before we go on to the session, I'll introduce myself. I'm Mandy Charman. I'm the manager of the Outcome Practice and Evidence Network. We work with the child and family service sector to support the sector's use, sharing and building of evidence. So if any sector members are out there, and I'm hoping there'll be lots of you, and you haven't heard of us, please drop us a line. And if we do know you, please drop us a line anyway. I'd like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the land we're each on today. For me, I'm on the Wurundjeri people's lands in the lovely Macedon Ranges. I'd also like to acknowledge elders past, present and future, along with any Aboriginal people in the audience. I also acknowledge the culture, traditions and wisdom of our Aboriginal colleagues and families we walk alongside. I acknowledge that sovereignty was never ceded, and this always was and always will be Aboriginal land. And whenever I say that, I get a little tingle. So sort of powerful. Housekeeping today. Really great to have people's proper names on their Zoom links, because that can be really meaningful for a presenter. If you do feel comfortable leaving your camera on, that's also lovely for a presenter to actually be delivering and talking to real people rather than blank screens. The session is going to finish at 1:30. There's been a slight modification. We've got Dr. Claire until delivering a presentation with a facilitated question and answer session at the end for, we're hoping 15 or 15 minutes, 10 or 15 minutes. If you can put your questions as they occur to you in the chat box, and then I will facilitate and pose them to Claire at the end. And the reason we do that is because people will often have a number of the same questions. So that means we can get the maximum value out of Claire's insights and get everyone's questions answered really efficiently. We are recording the session, so that might be a consideration with your camera. If you have tech problems, please reach out to Sarah Ryan, who is a tech whiz. Usually if you leave the room and come back, that's enough to sort the problem out. But if not, I can guarantee Sarah will be able to sort it out. Okay, let's get on to the real deal. We've just had the most delightful conversation with Claire ourselves, so I'm really looking forward to hearing everything you've got to say, Claire. Today's session is about what makes life good, measuring what matters to care leavers' well-being. Such an important topic. It's actually a follow-on from our last open forum in December last year, which does seem a very long time away now. Once again on out-of-home care leavers. So that, Claire, shows the importance of this area for our sector. Claire has extensive background in this space. For over 20 years, Dr. Claire Baker has specialised in research focusing on the experiences and outcomes for young people in and leaving care. Over this time, Claire has worked in both academic and senior policy roles, influencing the legislative and policy context and advancing research knowledge. Claire's published nationally and internationally, as well as creating tools for practice, leaving care self-assessment frameworks for services, care leaver, local offer toolkit. I'm already really excited. That sounds really great. Claire is an independent researcher working in the UK with a range of university, government and voluntary sector partners, and has extensive publications, which we will also share as we promote this recording after the time. I'm going to hand now over to Dr. Claire Baker. Welcome, Claire.
Oh, thank you, Mandy. And it's great to be here in Australia with you all. I'm just going to share my screen and make sure I don't share my holiday photos with you. So we'll just get going. Fantastic. So I'll just check that everyone can see the title slide. Fantastic. Great. So we're all at the right place and we're all ready to look at this really important issue, such a central question: what makes life good? So I'm going to take you on a little bit of a story about our learning around this topic. And today, together, we're going to look at the kind of background, the context and development. So I'll describe how we worked alongside young adults, young people, to create the Bright Spots programme, which has led to a new set of wellbeing indicators, which are measured by an online survey. I'll then take you through some selected national findings about what young people in the UK are telling us about how they feel. How do they think life is going? And then it's really important, if we're going to spend the time asking young people, and more importantly, young people are going to spend the time telling us how they're doing, we need to do something about that. We need to take things seriously. So I want to showcase some of the ways that local authorities in England have responded to how their young people are feeling, and then share some of the success and our aspirations about how we're trying to influence national government policy based on what young people say matters. Great. So just a little bit of context. I'm mainly talking about England, and the UK has different legal frameworks. So the framework in England is different to Scotland, Wales and Northern Ireland. So looking just at England, we'd see that at a point in time, we generally have over 80,000 children in care, and most are taken into care due to abuse and neglect. And the majority of young people in England will live in foster care, they are mainly in foster care, as I said, and only about 1 in 10 are in children's homes. I'll just check you can still see me okay. Yeah, great. The lights actually just went off in the room I'm on, so I'm just going to see if moving helps. There we go. So you can see this is live, so that is good. And actually each year we have high numbers of young people leaving care, so about 13,000. And if we were to add up the number of care leavers we have, you can see it's a real substantial group of young people, around 75,000. And it's important to remember that because it's nearly the same number of young people we have still in care. And actually, on reflection, I think leaving care services have sometimes been the Cinderella service. They've not had as much input, as much profile and support. Yet, of course, our care leavers are just our children who got bigger. This is what happens. So, you know, we need to continue that focus on aftercare and how our young people are doing as they grow older. A little bit of information on how things work. So leaving care services are run by local government, and that's following national legislation. And we actually have 152 local authorities in England, and they're all slightly different. They structure themselves slightly differently. They have slightly different policies, but they're following that national guidance. I won't get too technical, but in order to be eligible for leaving care support, so you have to meet certain criteria. And so the criteria is you need to have been in care, looked after, so in foster care or in a children's home for at least 13 weeks after your 14th birthday, with at least 1 day after 16. It's quite clunky, but once you've met that criteria, you become what we call a care leaver. So you're entitled to provisions under the Leaving Care Act. So that's the term I'm going to be using today. And then a whole range of support flows from meeting that eligibility. So support can continue up to 21, and you can opt up to support up to 25 if you request that. And we have things like personal advisors, which is the workers, and pathway plans. So the project I want to tell you about today really takes as its standpoint the ethos that children and young people are experts in their own lives. And if we were to look at the official government statistics in England, we would learn very little about children's lives, children in care's lives. There's objective measures, and the things that are recorded by professionals. It's how they think things are going. So when you look at those statistics, at no point can you have insight into do children themselves feel happy? Do they feel safe? Do they feel they're doing well? And so the Bright Spots programme tries to bridge this gap. It's about helping local authorities systematically listen to their children and care leavers about the things that are really important to them. It's all about subjective well-being, as I've said, and we created the 2 sets of well-being indicators. There's a set for the younger children still in care, and that starts from age 4 upwards, the Your Life, Your Care. And what we'll look at today in detail is the Your Life Beyond Care well-being indicators. And those indicators are measured by a survey. So Bright Spots is a partnership between Core and Voice, that's a children's rights charity, and the University of Oxford, spearheaded by Professor Julie Selwyn. And as I've said, it's all about identifying how children feel, but then doing something about it to inform our service development. The programme's been going about 10 years. The work we've put into the programme is substantial. So the information we collect, we can compare how young people are doing compared to their peers in the national population. So how are care leavers doing compared to other 16 to 25-year-olds? There's some links for you at the end of this presentation. So in the development phase of our work, we looked at lots of literature reviews, research reviews. There was an extensive piloting phase. We undertook cognitive interviewing with young people. So as we were developing the questions with young people, we really wanted to understand, is what we think we're asking actually what young people interpret? So for example, things like, if you put in a question, last year, did you have a change of worker? What are people thinking about when they hear last year? Is it last Christmas or last academic year or last the full 12 months? So really kind of focusing down and making sure the survey can be as good as it can be, really. So all about measuring what matters. So I'm sure lots of you here, I think, would agree that, to really understand what contributes to quality care and aftercare, we've got to listen to young people. But as I said, in England, our data has many gaps. And actually, in relation to care leavers, it only collects 3 main items. So the national statistics only tell us if the service is in touch with the young person, they have contact with them, whether the young person is in education or employment, and whether they're in suitable accommodation. But hold on to that, because suitable according to who? Because of course the national statistics, it's the professionals who record whether it's suitable or not. So we think there's problems with this approach, in terms of who records the information and what is collected. And I like this quote here because it's a bit of a challenge to us, really, because what's easily measurable is not always, what young people understand to do well. And some work in Scotland, the Promise up in Scotland, really reflecting that, has the care system actually, the data requirements evolved more to meet the needs of the system, rather than, being focused on what children and care experienced adults think. So, as I've been saying, what's important to children and young people is not always the focus of our work, but we feel it should be. So, quite briefly, developing the survey with care experienced young people, care leavers, we took about a year to do this. We worked with 2 different local authorities. We had a series of focus groups. So the question we started with was a really open question. What makes life good? So really working with that group about the whole range of things that they felt contributed to good well-being, to what makes life good. And there was then a series of sessions to pull apart the questions, to get the black marker pens out, scribble questions out, and really work together on our wording. And a session about distributing the survey. You know, who wants to fill a survey in? What would make you fill a survey in? Is there particular times of the day that make it easier? What can we do to help? How can we reach a really much larger group of care leavers? And then working with young people about actually the feedback loop and what happens as a result. So you can see there some of the work that we did. So our central question, and at that point, I'd just like to pause and if people feel comfortable, maybe anyone you would like to share in the chat, what sort of things come up for you when you see the question, what makes life good? So I'd really welcome those of you who feel able to maybe pop in the chat what you think of when you look at that question before we turn to what care leavers replied in relation to that. Great. I really appreciate people putting things in there. So I can see friendship, support, security, absolutely. Oh, lovely. Animals. Yeah, we're going to talk about pets. Yeah, good housing. Gosh, agency. Yeah, feeling you have some locus of control. Oh, I love, somebody's put love in. Yes, let's talk about love. Fantastic. Yes, a good life balance. Yeah, brilliant. I really appreciate people reflecting on that. And as I move on, I guess one of the, let me just make sure I can move us on. Great. And I guess part of the work we're trying to do in the program is to be a little bit challenging with services and say, you know, what is the purpose of leaving care support? Surely it's about promoting recovery, resilience, and well-being. You know, maybe we need to move away from a focus just on preparing young people for independent living. Surely it's about so much more than that, about making sure we can put those foundations in place to have a good life, whatever that means to different young people. And I guess this quote always stays with me, really. A young person saying, I know how to live independent, like surviving. I don't know how to live independent as in like being happy and living. And I think that's really poignant and, as I said, a challenge to all of us in our different roles. So at this point, I just want to share a really short film from some of our young people about what makes life good, and then we'll jump into the well-being indicators.
What makes life good for me is the positive people I surround myself with, because I feel like in life, a lot of what you do is on you, but at the same time, it's on you to get help from other people. And I feel like having that help makes you feel a part of the world rather than alone. And I think that's what makes a good life.
For me, family makes life great. Whether that be family that you're related to or family that are just friends, where you can have a good time, just relax and feel loved.
What makes life good for me is having the opportunity to help anyone, no matter what their scenario. I love helping people.
So what makes life good in my life is money, men, shopping, and clothes, probably.
Fantastic. I'll just reshare my screen and we'll continue. Brilliant. I'll just whiz down to where we were. Great. Okay, fantastic. So just to confirm, people can see the well-being indicators now, okay? Great. Okay, so what you've got on screen here is our, after the pilot work that I talked about, we created the Your Life Beyond Care wellbeing indicators as shown in this diagram. And so I'll just take you round the different domains. So what lives behind each of these indicators is a question that is in the Your Life Beyond Care survey. So firstly, in the green, you can see the people in your life. And I was really pleased to see someone mentioning animals. So pets are in there because care leavers talk to us about, for some young people, for some of them, pets are really important. They're non-judgmental. They show you love. They're really teach you about responsibility. And yet when we talk to children's social care in England, you know, it's quite rare that you hear talk about if a young person has to move placement when they're still looked after in foster care. They might have left behind a guinea pig or an animal, and that can be quite upsetting, you know. So it's really trying to tune into what's important for children and for care leavers. And then the other sorts of things we'd see in the indicators around the people in our lives, you know, having someone that you trust. Trust came out as one of the key factors in all of the work that we do. So someone who's got your back, who you can rely on. So we ask a question about that. Having a good friend. You know, in our findings, friends come out as the top emotional support for young people. Do we prioritize friendships enough when young people are younger? You know, are there barriers for some of our foster carers? You know, do we talk about this? What's our role in this? You know, it's a conversation we need to be having with young people. Do they want us to help support this? And so if we moved on to things associated with being a care leaver, you know, there's things around, you know, trusting your worker, having stability of workers, so not having lots of different workers. And I always find a stark finding is around nationally in England, around 24% of care leavers say, you know what, I haven't had a full explanation of why I was taken into care. You know, I've got outstanding questions. You know, that's really stark, around a quarter. You know, we know it's really wrapped up, connected to identity. So, you know, what can we do about that? And moving around, we've got feelings. Again, something that has such an influence on well-being. This came up for our young people, but again, do we talk about this enough? Do we have uncomfortable conversations about body image, about our appearance? So there's a question in there. Is it the role for children's services? Loneliness is in there as well. And then moving around to living independently. Fun, we don't talk about fun enough. We're talking about young adults here, 18, 19, 20. So, you know, these are some of the things that came up around what makes life good and became our well-being indicators. And in the center, you can see 4 measures of well-being that we take from our Office for National Statistics. So that's the questions that allow us to compare how young people are doing with their peers in the general population. And so just a couple of things which I've highlighted, you know, phones and internet. We created the indicators pre-pandemic. I think we're all talking a lot more about the essential part that technology, Wi-Fi plays, and we're starting to see local authorities paying contributions towards this. But so there's questions in there about phones. You know, young people told us they help you stay connected. You feel less lonely. You can get discounts. You know, you find out information. So when we work alongside a local authority to do the Bright Spots programme, we're really wanting them to set up a working group with young people to coordinate and distribute the survey, adapting it to their local context, making sure right from the beginning they're starting to plan about what they're going to do as a result. You know, they're not just going to receive the report and it sits on a shelf. The survey, we want to be a safe space for young people to fill it in. So we have a trusted adult methodology. So we want a trusted adult to introduce the survey to young people, to tell them about it. But importantly, this can't be their worker or their carer, because there's questions in there about them, and we want young people to feel free to answer. It's got to be quick and easy. We don't want to spend our time filling in surveys, so it should take 10 to 15 minutes. It's generally filled in online. Young people were really clear they wanted this to be anonymous and of course optional, and we must avoid stigmatizing. If a survey is distributed, you don't want, for the younger ones, we don't want anyone pulled out of class, anything like that. And I'll just go through this quite quickly. So there's a lot of work at the beginning about making sure everybody in the local authority, all care leavers, get a chance to fill in the survey if they choose. We then do the analysis back at Core and Voice in partnership with the University of Oxford. There's then a lot of work to tell everybody about what's happening, setting targets. We try to encourage you said, we will do together type response, and get local authorities to write commitments, implement work plans, make sure there's that feedback loop. So, yep, we've been going quite a while, and we're really proud. We've managed to hear from over 20,000 children in care and care leavers, working with more than 60 local authorities. So I'll now just spend a little bit of time telling you some of the national findings before we then look at what people have done as a result. So it's at particular points in time, we can aggregate all the results, and we periodically publish reports. So you've got the links at the end, but so far we've got about 7,000 care leavers have, of those 20,000, about 7,000 responses are from care leavers. So that's what I'm basing today on. And I can't tell you about the findings for every indicator in that bubble diagram you saw, but I just want to focus down on accommodation, because we know this. We know where we live is more than just a physical space. Young people tell us about a home. It's got to be somewhere you feel safe, somewhere you can unwind, where you might spend quite a lot of your time. So in the research review that I did to inform the development of the survey, young people really emphasize this feeling safe and living in neighborhoods where they felt settled. And actually wider evidence on well-being backs up the importance of where we live, how that's associated with our well-being. So when we look at some of the national results, we see that whilst just under 2/3 of care leavers are saying, I always feel safe where I live, we've got about 1/3, you can see highlighted there, who don't always feel safe where they live. And I think this quote really speaks to that. A young person saying, I've got a right to enjoy where I live, and I've got a right to feel safe. So only around 50% of our young people feeling settled, and about 50% feeling safe in their neighborhood. So clearly an area that services can focus on and look to make improvements. And when we have the big data set aggregated, of course, we can look at things in more detail. So we saw that feelings of safety didn't particularly differ by gender or ethnicity, but there's a group of young people who identify as disabled, and they were much more likely to feel unsafe. And the survey has a few points where if care leavers choose, they can write comments as well. So when we analyze comments, people talking about the poor quality of the accommodation they're in, worrying about the behavior of neighbors and others who live near to them, real worries about money. And this young person saying, I want to have zero worries that I never become homeless. Absolutely. That's, what a stress, as a young adult having that feeling. And you'll remember I talked about the national government statistics. So I just put this in here to illustrate a point. So if you looked at the government statistics, about 85% of care leavers are said to be in suitable accommodation. But actually, when you ask young people themselves, the number drops, only about 68% are saying, where I live is right for me. So, it's really important to consider who we're asking. So I'll just take you through some more kind of global findings from our work in this area. Again, this continues to shock me, and I think it should. I think we know after young people leave care, there can be concerns and worries, and yet our evidence just so clearly shows that steep decline in well-being once young people leave care. So we're able to look at how our 11 to 18-year-olds, so still in care, are feeling compared to those who, not much older, are now having left care. And you can see in each of these indicators that decline. So if you were to return to feeling safe, dropping from 84% down to 64%. So when we compare with children in care, a much higher proportion of care leavers are telling us they're unhappy, unsafe, and unsettled. And then when we're able to compare to the general population, again, care leavers not feeling they're doing as well. Loneliness, again, double the proportion of care leavers feeling lonely often or always, struggling financially. Often we require more support and care than the general population because of our experiences, though in reality we get much less. Please fix that. And I just wanted to put the spotlight on a group of young people who answer the question whether they consider themselves to be disabled. Now, we have in England no national data on the number of care leavers who are disabled, so we just don't know. And yet from our comprehensive, survey with high numbers, a quarter of young people are reporting a disability or long-term health condition. And that's much higher than the proportion reported in the general population of young people. And then when we look, analyze how these young people are feeling, lower well-being, lonelier, less likely to feel safe, struggling financially. So I think at a very basic, we call on government and local authorities to have systems in place to ask their young people about things like this, so we can start to understand experiences and work alongside young people about what could make things better. What I would like to say about Bright Spots is it's a very balanced program. The name comes from, we're looking for bright spots of practice. So what we see is in some areas, when we compare across the different local authorities, some care leavers are feeling much better in some areas. So we want to try to understand what's happening there. Can we learn from what's going on and share that practice? So you can see a couple of illustrations of this. So whilst about 30% of care leavers average report low well-being, that drops in one of the local authorities, the best performing. So only about 14% have low well-being. What's going on there? Similarly with feeling safe, is that local authority doing something different? So, the care system can get things right, and, we need the opportunity to learn from each other. One of the really good news stories in much of our work we do is the relationships young people have with their worker. So compared to children still in care, care leavers are much more likely to trust their worker. They're much more likely to keep the same worker over time. And it's really lovely when I go back to local authorities to give them their individual results, to tell them some of the lovely, although anonymized, I have to take all the names out, feedback. She's amazing. She always goes above and beyond for you, always makes sure you're okay, lets you know she's around, which is what you want from your worker. So because we have a lot of information, we're able to do logistic regression and different analyses to try to unpick what are the factors associated with both high and low well-being. And you can see on this diagram to the side, you've got care leavers with very high well-being. They're much more likely to feel safe and settled, feel proud and strong, have those bigger support networks. And sort of to the flip of it, you know, those with low well-being, feeling lonely, experiencing stress, more likely to report being unhappy with how they look. So everything we ask about is important in the survey. It's come from care leavers, but our analysis shows that some things are statistically more strongly associated with well-being. And these are the things we think services need to particularly focus on. So you'll see there highlighted in orange, something about improving connections and relationships. So really making sure we've got that support. It's great. Care leavers are reporting good relationships with their workers, but that's a time-limited relationship. We often try to ask, who will be there at 30? You know, services do end at some point. You know, are we putting enough effort into making sure our young people have got that wide range of people around them? Here, highlighted in green, absolutely more around supporting emotional well-being, emotional health and mental health, making sure we've got those specialist services where we need, making sure we check in day to day. There we can see improving accommodation support highlighted as one of the key areas to focus on, and providing practical and financial support as well. So some of our recommendations are really about making sure we really focus down on what makes life good, that it influences individual plans, our local offers, and it also influences national policy. Something about really stepping up to be the best parent. Young people, if we reflected on those well-being indicators, care leavers are not asking for anything extraordinary. They're just asking for parity of opportunity, things to build on to make a good life. And it's really down to services to step up, to level up, to address that postcode lottery and to shape ourselves so we avoid some of those cliff edges. I think there's something about recognizing a group who identify as having health conditions and disability, and making sure we empower our workforce, that they have the time, they have the support to develop those trusting relationships. Great, so I just want to spend the final time looking at some of the actions that both local authorities and we've seen from government on the back of some of the work. Before I do that, I would say we try to talk about the Bright Spots programme as a programme rather than just a survey, because it's about building in as much time and effort to do something with your results. We would say, though, if a local authority came to us and said, we're only using Bright Spots to listen to our children and our care leavers, we'd be really worried by that. So this is one of a range of tools, a range of ways we need to listen and hear how young people are doing. So I just wanted to make that point as well. So you'll have seen now it's very much rooted in the local, understanding how your young people are doing and developing those local responses. But in doing that, it's great because it gives us that national understanding, that ability to benchmark, that ability to make comparisons. So we have a free resource hub on our website where we write up practice examples. You'll be pleased to hear we write them up as 2 slides. They're very short and snappy. People don't have lots of time to read. We don't want services to copy the ideas, but it's about being inspired, because you need to work with your young people to come up with what works in your context based on your findings of how your young people are feeling. So East Riding, which is up in Yorkshire in England, really trying to respond to findings about fun and loneliness. A lot of the things that local authorities have done are low or no cost. England is not awash with extra money, as a lot of places. So, you know, coming up with ideas that don't cost a lot of money. So setting up football teams, investing in spending time together, doing activities was one of the things East Riding did. Coventry, which is in the Midlands, when we analyse the surveys, the results for each local authorities, we do statistical testing looking for bright spots. So on average, are, for example, Coventry's young people feeling statistically better or worse than the average? And Coventry were awarded a bright spot of practice for trust. So we tried to talk to them and say, well, what's happening? Why do you think, you know, your care leavers report higher levels of trusting their worker? And they reflected back that as a local authority, culturally, they tried to encourage their workers to act as a parent, to visit, but not visit just for statutory reasons, to pop in, to just do check-ins, to use a range of social media. There's a purchase card, which makes it much less bureaucratic to go out for a meal together, to celebrate success. So that they felt that kind of contributed to the fact they were awarded this bright spot. They were on average doing better. I really loved this example from Sheffield, again, up north in Yorkshire. They were really struck, young people, by the fact that care leavers were struggling. They created this challenge around living on a very low income, getting the director of the service to live on £24 a week. You know, it's a real experiential session for the week, you know, and encouraging them to have really honest conversations about how that felt. Again, body image, again, Sheffield young people really promoting body image. They put on this fabulous fashion show about loving ourselves. And you can read more about that when you receive the slides afterwards. As well, on our website, we've got some short films. Young people have shared some of what they've been doing. This idea in Stockport is around the video Ring doorbell, and young people wanted to feel safer in their homes. So they piloted the scheme, they provided Wi-Fi, it was fairly low cost. But what it did for those, particularly young women, they reported feeling safer. But actually what it did across the council was it made the director of housing start to ask more questions about why they were placing care leavers in properties where they felt unsafe. So, you know, these actions have ripple effects. So to conclude, you know, we really feel the practice policy developments need to be measured by whether young people feel their lives have improved as a result of the changes we put in place. Again, some quotes about really focusing in on children and young people's voice. And at the national policy level, we've just had a care review. One of the missions to come out of that care review is around love. So no young person should leave care without at least 2 loving relationships by 2027. So the government have just responded to that independent review, that report. And look, they've started to think about what measures they might include. So we're really pleased to see things like feeling lonely, having a really good friend, someone you can trust, hopefully being integrated at the national level as something that we measure, something that is valued. And again, we see it in our inspection framework. So I'm going to bring us to conclusion. You can go and look at some of these links. We've just run a 3-year project where we've used the Bright Spots approach more intensely with 8 local authorities. So we've really learned much more about co-production, and we're really transparent about our learning journey as well, and about the different points where we can invite young people to work alongside us. So it's absolutely not about one group of young people working for the whole time, but can we offer a menu of opportunities to get involved? So we're going to have some questions, I think, but, maybe questions you can take away is, how do you currently hear the voice of young people? And do you really feel your services or the work you do are really responsive to what care leavers say is important? So I'll stop sharing there. So thanks very much, everyone.
Thank you so much, Claire. There was so much food for thought there. And I mean, of course, I'm going to the very obvious, how can we do this? Because it does happen in patches, and there's some really innovative work happening in out-of-home care and alternative care here as well. But probably my observation, and I'd love anyone else's thoughts, not as systematically. So why don't we go through, there has been a fair few questions. If you can also, we could unmute ourselves and in a moment perhaps have any people who would like to put forward their own comments about experiences in our out-of-home care system, because I'm sure Claire would be very interested in that as well. Look, these, I was trying to order them, frankly, in sort of categories, but it was starting to do my head in. So these are going to jump around a little bit, but that's all good. So we have first question, relatively simple. What number caseloads do your care leaver workers have?
Yeah, great question. So the first thing to say on that is there's no guidance on it. So you won't find any numbers that tell local authorities they should cap it. So the answer is the average varies across local authorities. And yeah, I think 17, 18 would feel more manageable than 22, 24 young adults, but we don't collect data on it and we don't mandate for it. So it fluctuates according to, how stressed, as in how much stress on a service there is. Yeah, but lower workload frees up time. Makes sense.
Yeah. Yeah.
So,
and you were saying earlier that across your local government areas, there's no, it's left to them to determine what they do. So that really reflects that. Yeah.
So the national policy is absolutely set. So the law is set nationally and the guidance is set, but the devil's in the detail sometimes. So the local, so you'll find very few numbers in national guidance. So, for example, our equivalent of home stretch, staying put, government wouldn't tell you how much to pay for how much to pay a carer. So you find that local variation at things like that. But the government would say you need to have this as an option, if that makes sense, as one example.
Yeah. Really pertinent question. What were the challenges when you were getting going to engage children and young people in the survey? Often we find, of course, young people are reluctant to fill out surveys or assessments. They think they're overly studied, and they're really disengaged. Yeah. So how?
100%. So we always say it's going to be a sample. We've never hit 100%. We've hit 80%. We're really pleased with that. Even then, it's going to be sample. And it's got to be a choice. The first question is, do you want to do this? No. Great. It closes. No, don't do it. So there's lots of ways to encourage young people to fill it in. The main thing we find is belief. Have we really genuinely, has the local authority genuinely committed to this? Are they able to convey that they'll do something about it? Have we got the director engaged? Is there, a lead? Is it resourced? Do young people believe that something will happen? Yeah, and the trusted adult is around sort of helping explain that and making sure it's an informed choice. We don't give any guidance on incentives. It's up to a local authority. If they offer an incentive, if there's a pizza night, come and watch a film, so there's lots of we've got lots of tips for encouraging. But the main thing I say when I start working with a local authority is, this is really hard work. Are you up for it? So no magic solution, but and we have variable response rates.
Yeah. And have you found, as the program has actually delivered benefits and been acted upon, that there is those positive effects that both spruik up everyone's participation. Does that make a difference that you'd get a reputation as?
Yeah, and
yes?
I think an individual local authority, we would say, hey, don't do it every year. No, you need time to do this. So we say, if you want to do it again, every 2 years. And if you're going to do it again, show your young people what you did. So for example, in Hull, they created a words and pictures film, which is social workers talking back to children about the findings and what they will commit to doing in their practice, and, in a really short video on YouTube that young people can access. So you've got to close that loop a little bit. But it'll only ever be one of your mechanisms for listening. And so it should. A survey won't suit everyone. Yeah. But I welcome the question. That's great.
Fun, this is a great one. Fun was listed as a key aspect of wellbeing. However, we find that our care levers are so complex that they can't focus on fun activities and they're focusing on survival. Was there any suggestions on how we could help them move into this sort of space?
Oh, thanks for that question. Yeah, I mean, if we would go to something like, Maslow's hierarchy, we know that we've got to shore up our foundations. So is there any, so I guess often I go back to relationships as well. So I'm not sure I've got an easy answer for that, but I suppose when there's an awful lot presenting for a young person that, we need to kind of shore up the accommodation, the income, the having someone who's, we've got to get the foundations right in their life before fun. And the best way to do that, I suppose, is being alongside them, knowing them. I think peer research, having, we have something called children in care councils, which are kind of groups that sit advising the local authority. They're great kind of advocates for encouraging other young people to get involved. So coming up with ideas, I don't know what's fun as a 19-year-old. It's quite a long time, so using your assets, which is your best, which is your young people. But I think in that case, when the main thing is sorting out the things that are worrying young people, I suppose, first. Yeah.
And in your experience, once that's sorted out, there's also a growth moment to actually support the young people to actually identify what they do think is fun. If you've not had much opportunity to have fun and that's never been open, there's this real opening up for that as well, isn't there? I mean, that wouldn't just be a straightforward thing.
Yeah, I mean, you're making me think of an example from Sheffield, who I worked with quite recently, so they're in my mind. So we have something called the virtual school, which is, it's as if all the children in care and care leavers are in a school, but they're not. So they monitor and keep an eye on how educational attainment is going across the local authority, although physically the children are in different schools, if that makes sense. But what we saw in Sheffield as a result of Bright Spots was the virtual school invested in creative curriculum. So they sort of shifted a bit away from attainment and they put some resource into poetry and spoken word, and they got some fabulous artists in, and, so other ways to learn, basically. So, and young people who maybe would never have stood on a stage, or, they didn't have to stand on the stage. But so that's been going a year or two with them. And so that's been nice to see that sort of shift from more formal education focus across. So that was maybe an example. These are all in the resource bank, so do have a look.
So that's a really interesting thing as well, because of course we've probably got a lot of direct service providers here, like resi care workers or other people involved with disadvantaged young people more broadly. And I'm wondering, out of all of this, what would be the top things that your collective work across all of these experiences might have highlighted as tips that resi care workers or those directly at the coalface could keep in mind? I mean, we've got system questions coming up, but I thought just to get in on the ground question, what would you want their takeaways to be thinking about?
'em? 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 I think change happens at different levels, doesn't it? You know, systemic level, structural level, and then at the personal level. So, you know, what can I do with the young people I'm alongside working with? So we've produced a number of kind of videos of the findings on different topics, and they come with a reflection sheet, and it just asks a really simple question like, what can I do? So really you can, you know, did any of the indicators jump out at you as relevant to your practice? And then reflecting on that question. So sometimes we have things around understanding why you're in care. You know, what can I do on that? You know, do I feel comfortable having these conversations? If not me, who? You know, where do I go for support to have difficult conversations about helping young people understand their stories, their personal history. So I think it's sort of a reflection about the indicators and how they may, you know, interact with your role, whatever that may be.
Yeah, I mean, in that regard, have you experienced local areas or particular providers using the findings or the survey structure and questions therapeutically rather than as a one-off survey? Has it been adopted for other uses?
So, great question. We are thinking, you know, it's 10 years and things evolve. So we're having conversations as a team about not quite mainstreaming, but some of these questions could be inserted into pathway planning, you know, the day-to-day conversation prompts we have. So it's definitely something we're looking at, but not as in strict kind of therapeutic terms that might come out in a conversation, a relationship. So we've definitely seen changes to planning documents, policy documents, but yeah, whether we've nudged therapeutically, you know, the one-to-one practice, it's more on kind of reflection. So yeah, maybe we could talk more sometime.
Oh, I'd really like to talk about that in terms of, because I mean, big in our sector, all parts of the sector, as use of outcome measurement tools, trying to find the most appropriate ones. And there are a lot of things that have been that we try to use in that context, in the out of home care or disadvantaged youth sort of context, and they sort of don't fit very well. And yeah, so that would be really interesting. How did you go about integrating the different understandings of what wellbeing means to young people and how the system understands this? The gap in the stats between suitable accommodation as defined by authorities and young people is sort of huge. And how's that relationship and sharing of knowledge and building of knowledge going?
Yeah. So how it's going. So I think there's so much in that question. So there's quite a lot you can read about where we landed in terms of there's lots of different approaches to well-being. We did an international literature review on different approaches to well-being. We're informed by various theoretical models. So, you know, if you're interested in what we're influenced by, do read some of our papers on that. I think the second part of the question was more about influencing and how we can sort of square whose voice matters. Would that be a sort of snappy way of, yeah, I think sometimes you have to keep saying the same thing. Maybe you say it slightly differently. You know, these findings amazingly don't overly change, despite the fact we have findings in Wales, Scotland, very different LAs in England. You know, young people are loud and clear on what matters. So I guess we continue to elevate voice if we have that national platform. We do that with young people. You know, we want young adults who are interested to be part of explaining to government about whose voice matters and trying to bridge that gap. It's quite slow and change is slow, but I think you know, I remain an optimist that we have to kind of have a vision of where we're getting to and keep nudging on, really. So I'm not sure if I quite answered that, but I appreciate the question. I'm going to ponder some of these. It's great to have everyone's warm welcome and engagement. Thank you.
And I mean, what you're describing is overall challenging and exciting journey, really, with so many different components. I'm just aware that we've now reached the 1:30 mark, which is so disappointing because we do have a range of other questions. I'm wondering if you would be open, Claire, if we were to pose them to you separately, providing any additional thoughts, or even I'm sure you would have resources linked because I don't want to create more work for you. And perhaps too, we'll ensure that we curate at Open, we'll curate as part of this event reflection when we share the recording to our participants and across our broader network, some of the materials you're talking about, to try and seed some sort of engagement and adaptation and exploration, because I can see this being hugely valuable for our own sector.
Yeah, absolutely.
Would there be any final words you'd like to leave everyone in? I'm sure people would like to hear any last thoughts just to wrap up.
Oh, yeah, just stay in touch, stay connected. You know, I think care leavers who've shared how they're feeling, you know, they want to be listened to. They want their voices to matter. And so I really appreciate people taking the time. We've got lots of free resources on the website. So if any of it lands for you, any of it is useful, use the videos, use the reflection sheets. And I've put my email on the slide. So, you know, keep in touch would be, and I'm really interested to learn more about the Australian context. So I'm learning from you guys as well. So I think that would be my final thoughts, if that's okay.
Of course, that was so interesting, and just the tip of the iceberg in terms of the potential to learn from this, you know, really well-established sort of approach. Just want to thank you so much for your time. I know you're on a holiday, and if I'd been you, I probably wouldn't have wanted to talk about work while I was on holiday.
No,
but shows your commitment.
one of my highlights of the holiday, honestly. Yeah.
We're very keen, and I'm just wondering about our survey link, just a little bit of feedback about how the session has gone. And we'll be just sitting here for a bit longer. So if anyone wants to hang back, I'm sure Claire would be happy to meet people just for a short time in the follow-up to this. Thank you once again. If you're not already a subscriber to Open, Outcome Practice and Evidence Network, our link has already also been put. It's free, and it will just means you'll get monthly newsletters about all the activities we do, and hopefully you want to be involved in more of these types of activities. Thank you so much, Claire. It's been a total and utter privilege.